Let's see. Are we live? This is the first time we're trying this new software, so we're gonna see whether it's working or not. And it looks like it is. Okay, so I'm usually I stream from OBS, and that means I streamed out to you folks. But today we've got the whole crew. We've got Chad, Julio, and it looks like Raul. So it is going to be in interactive format today. We're going to have Julio be the lead, and you're going to watch me try and fumble through this particular. Try and fumble through Restream.io, which I'm currently learning as we're doing this. So what I'm going to do, and this is also for the folks in the call, I'm going to try and share my screen, which would be one thing, and then put Julio and the others on the screen. So let us go ahead and do that. I'm going to share a screen. Let me do that. Takes one moment. Causal Inference Book Club. Start screen sharing. I want to share the Google Slides. All right, let's allow that. We should have a screen up. Hopefully you folks are all seeing a screen. And then I'm going to shift to cinema mode and add all of our folks in. So now, all right, it looks like we've got it. So thank you all for that patience. With that, like I mentioned, Julio is the lead of this one. He put together this fantastic presentation for us, read through the chapter, did all the heavy lifting this time. So last time Chad did it, which we appreciated. He inspired somebody else and take it on. So that's where we're at. Julio, you want to take it away? And I'll hit the slides for you as you need them.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, everybody. And thanks for coming. We're going to talk about the synthetic control chapter. Before we start, I want to say I organized the material a little bit differently because I read pretty rigorous. But I wanted to I thought a different point of view might help me learn it better. I got a lot of information from this chapter and then from so if you'll advance slide, yeah. So this quote out here, arguably the most important innovation in 15 years. That seems like a pretty strong. Oops. Chat says me, or is your audio okay?
It's a little wavery, but it's not. I don't think it's you. I think it is the platform. So I'm trying to debug it as we go.
So with this quote, I think exciting, and I feel that after I've learned a useful technique. So,
all right.
Next slide. So my idea here was to do more of that into an example before formality and the more forming, have a conclusion, kind of wrapping up what I think. Okay, so. Intuition, yeah. Next slide, that's fine. I mimic your slides. Experiments or natural experiments. To do is we want to know the effect of, for example, this is something like Great Britain's GDP, or the effect of Germany reunification on GDP. In the literature that was referenced, some other literature I read, things like immigrant, and then the example we're going to go Proposition 99 on smoking and cab. And in these cases, experiments that you can't do an A/B test on because you can't unify, you can't unify, you can't leave the European Union, things like that. And these are particularly good examples because the different markets at aggregate level that you could to try to figure out what the effect of the what. So there are different markets that we're going to compare. One thing to keep an eye out for spillover, though, make sure that like reunification on, but if we end up trying to compare it to another country, that maybe because they also were enemy or something like that, that's something that we want to look out for. So we'll talk about that more in depth in a minute, but this is the general idea. All right, next slide. All right. Quantitative, they call them these quantitative comparative case studies, because quantitative as opposed as qualitative. I think with qualitative, what could happen or what should happen, and you got some numbers, and you're trying to figure out what really happened. The solution can be inferred by comparing treated against some untreated things, and you can do and difference kind of compare directly pre and post intervention. When you do that, a synthetic control method, you create a model of the target unit, of the unit, the untreated units, and we'll use the word event and treatment kind of interchangeably. So this model, and then you use that model to predict untreated unit after the event, and then you compare that to outcome that the counterfactual that you don't know. And again, this assumes that there's no interference between the treated or that's something in groups. As far as I know, I think that this first appeared in this. The units in a state or country or some kind of people of units. So, also, I want to say that I based it on the Mixtape book and on the, but if anything good from them is like direct copy from them, and anything that I misunderstood. So if you have a question, please let me know. Speak up and let's discuss it. Okay. The next slide. Use is the because it's a pretty straightforward example. It's easy to understand. 88, California adopted this use 25% tax per pack of cigarettes, and was pretty significant. I didn't look at the prices, but that quarter was a lot of money. And clear ad campaigns, some try to stop people from smoking. The cigarette sales in California. That's kind of if we just look at California selling like 97.5 packs per person when they 90, it looks like, and then a year later it dropped to half. So obviously it worked. Everything it reduced smoking by quite a bit. But is that we go to the next slide? Yeah. We different where we pick another state, and the state I got the data from some other places too, because I had to join it. I randomly picked Colorado. We can do the difference that the cigarette sales dropped by 5 points in those 2 years. We saw so the control unit, and I actually randomly picked Colorado, which a pretty good comparison. This assumes that the trends are parallel. That what happened to Colorado or representative of how California changed. So correct or suitable control unit. Slide. You can see that if you do this for every state that we had data for, I think there were 39 states, one of them being California. So if you did the diff and diff answers, so you get minus 5.5, minus 5.8. So some state, if you could use that like a 15 pack, you could even get like a 5-pack increase depending on which state. So you have to be really careful about which state you're going to use. Simple comparison. Be interesting and surprising. And then the proposition, the smoking as an example, not digging into this. I'm not a smoking expert or anything, so I don't know how good. In Colorado, how good, whether the person or not, or whatever. So it's just kind of all right. Next slide. And the reason that you get all those different for the simple different is that in general, this is the trends for all the states, and the trends are that some states, very top, their sales their sales were really high at the beginning, and then they dropped. State having a really big difference, where the sales don't seem to drop that much. So that's a smaller difference, giving you a very different answer in both. So maybe you can compare California to see what the mean trend in. And you look at the next slide. Yeah, this is California. You might want to do like a different Is it really parallel before the 88, which is that blue line there? This than on the national trend, but then there's a really big difference there too. So the question here is, could you try to interpolate like a straight line from where from California from before be the difference, and that would cut like halfway through the scatter or anything, but that would cut, and then that difference between that the actual line that you got could be your.
I just had a question.
Sure. Yeah.
I just want to clarify that the comparison states didn't have tobacco taxes during this time period either. Is that correct? You said 35, so I assume that is all these taxes. All these states do not have tobacco tax increases in them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And can you mute? Because that's a really good question. And that's the point. Yeah, there are. You have to obviously exclude states that you don't. And in this case, they did exclude states similar policies, and units that you feel by a particular intervention in one. I don't think they included anything for that effect thing, but let's say if it was easy enough to cross the border or else that affect the your control state and vice versa. So you've got to look out for the 39 because adopted similar at the time before in this time period they adopted those things, so those were not included. Yeah. So this is what happens if you do an even average of the other, pretty similar to what we're going to end up doing, except doing in some average. We're going to rate them higher and then use that to California would have done. So next slide. So we're going to select a subset of the words, the vocabulary they use. They call it a donor into the synthetic control. So you're going to select the untreated donors that are most, and that's an interesting question. Like what? So to figure out what they are, you could, and maybe you should include the target variable to do the prediction. Doing the target variable, the selection, the matching. You can see in this data there was also sales like average age, or you could probably like the smoking, education levels, anything like that you think that you want to include in the what other states are like other states are like California. So choose to weight those coordinates or coordinates, covariates. You can either specific should be, or you could also kind of minimize a function. Use those covariates weights to minimize. Let me read what I said. Calculate unit weighted and untreated. So you use those covariates as the difference between the covariates between the in the pre-treatment period, and so minimize the error by choosing the correct way. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. And then you, on the target variable, to predict what the target treated unit would have been if it had been untreated. And then you can compare those to the prediction unit. Did that make sense, or did I? So
it makes sense.
Next.
It's like a fitting a regression is what I felt like it was. You sort of fit half a regression and then fit the other half. I always wonder why. I did wonder why in this book, and it feels like other synthetic control examples, they talk about it in a different way other than just fitting a regression and then doing a counterfactual. But I'm curious, yeah.
Yeah, it is exactly like a that a little bit, and then we can talk about. I don't know that I completely buy. Well, so let's go to the next.
Next slide. Okay.
Yeah. So if you the way they want you to do it, I did it with Brave and True. I came up with this and say that I would weight New Hampshire, like 46% New Hampshire. I'd take 24% of Nebraska, 11% of Nevada, and to do my use to predict what the outcomes would be for California. And there we can see that the vertical line is the 1988, when we can see it's a pretty good tight fit to the left. The treatment started, and so we see the effect between the blue line and the red line. That makes sense with what people did, or, with. All right. Next slide is that that gap between the blue and the plot that instead. Plot that specifically. The treatment, everything was pretty close to zero, and it starts to drop, and then at the very end, by 2000, we get an estimate of less per person is what we think. Position 99 was the effect of. There are a couple of interesting points here. 70, the error is pretty big. And then, and that could just be because there was no data for 90, might be a little bit kind of an outlier that way. It actually seems to drop before, like in 1987, it drops, and then in 80 kind of stays the same, and then it starts to drop some more. So, of this other effect that we can talk about in a minute, the gap chart, I think they call it in the literature, and it tells you what the effect is. All right, the material in they did it, and we can talk about more how did that chart or replicate it or redid that. So they start with this Cuba, Miami, where from Cuba that came into Miami, and the effect was the unemployment rate, the native unemployment rate. And the result was that the paper came up with was that it not. And then this was people paid attention to it because it violated them. So he used the difference in different. It violated conventional wisdom because everybody kind of migration would decrease or increase unemployment. It didn't. So people were that. And then they were skeptical of the control group. So he did difference in difference, and he picked what other city it was. Or I think he picked like 4 other cities. Well, oh no, yeah, I wrote in the notes at Tampa, St. Pete, and we're questioning why whether those were good states to compare, what that meant and everything. The last point from the reflects sampling variance. I don't think that the chapter explained it very well. The unemployment figures were calculated, and so maybe sampling in the different cities, maybe they weren't procedure or exactly the same number, so maybe there's some error. I don't know, so I don't. But I wrote that down, but I don't really by that. But the important thing is that about how you pick the control of the difference in different study. Any comments? Okay. Picking the synthetic controls, and that synthetic and over like just subjectively pick the cities. So you need to find similar units. So you're going to find them based on the. If you're looking at the cities, maybe the population levels would be good, or maybe the previous unemployment level, income levels, or the minimum wage, things compare to cities, and say, so you can kind of justify Atlanta because it's got very similar covariate to Miami, and I feel like they're important. And then he also say you got to avoid, pick the city that was too close to Miami, maybe or something like that, and that would have affected the unemployment level in both cities. Is that although it's more data driven, the covariates you choose do affect the waste of the final synthetic control units. So data driven or data justified, guided by that data. And I wrote that where I should have moved it, saying how you justify your choices. That would be do a couple different approaches. The agree or match or that can justify that you did find it that you claim you did. Some people went back and redid the unemployment study with an answer that there was no major effect. So that result was not expected. seems to be okay. Next slide. Oh, got a control slide.
Is that the right
Oh,
slide?
sorry.
Oh.
That's the right side. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay.
No. Oh, formalization. Because I think maybe I talked about the wrong thing. The formal. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay. So somehow we got out of sync. Maybe I was. So the formalization. So what we want, the effect I'm sorry, the effect is the difference in unit and the sum of the untreated units. So you have J plus 1, but they pick J plus 1 units at first equation says. The 1 is treated, T is at minus the sum from they say J1 is the treated unit, 2 to the rest of them is the untreated unit by its weight and its outcome and X. So the question is, and W is done when in the matching step. Matching, you calculate the weights based on whatever your covariates are, and they could be the outcome variable plus unemployment and education or whatever you might want. You're also going to have V, which is the weighting for the variable matrix, but you can just think of it as a vector weights for the covariates. You're going to choose a different way, and then you gives you W, and so you can minimize W, pick W, so this error, the error between the covariate, the weighted covariates of the untreated units. And the way, or the reason that this is linear regression or regression is that the weights for the donor units, they must be not a regular linear regression. You can have negative value 1, which is not the case for do that in a minute, but that's the idea. So let's go to the next slide. So the weights have to be non-negative A, that this will give you benefits that you want. One is that the weight first thought, well, what about if you use regularization linear regression? The weights will be sparse. And then having non-negative weights extrapolate outside of like donor units, inside of the support for donor units. Now, I'm not of this math, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think the idea is, well, it also doesn't require, but I don't think that's compared to, well, I don't think that's compared, I think it was just in that section, but maybe it's because, let's say something's going to happen tomorrow, today, and then see what the effects of treatment data to set up the experiment. And they stress like this, unit weights, their percentages, if I said something was negative 2.3 Nevada, like subtract Nevada, might make, but half of Nevada makes sense compared to like a negative fractional value of Nevada. So those are the big arguments for the synthetic regression, where all synthetic control is that the weights are add up to 1. Next slide. This I think is from Brave and True, and the idea, this picture, if you were trying to come up with a synthetic control for that unit, and you had these you could regression, and that would give you like a control 2, but you don't have to. And we talk about like what extrapolating from this data to come up with to predict the treatment unit. Really bad, so they don't want you to do that. When you stick to this model, you have to, meaning you can only use you can only use it would be a positive multiple one of these, and I can't see my slide. So it's goal 3 to get the 6 cell, but it's going to be pretty. So that the positive 1 will mean that you control on the perimeter of this convex hull or inside this an outlier. This is very different than units you're trying to use. So this is another, and we'll see that a little bit. Make sense, or is that like a clear idea of why we're doing this regression? Okay, I'll take that as yes. So I went and found the data in it, and they had this table in there. Like super clear. Well, it is that the covariates weights. They use those weights then to calculate what the covariate for synthetic California, and then they use for real California, and they compare that to the other 38 states. And so they threw it up, the log of that, and there's a difference between the real and synthetic, and average is the same. The population age between 15 and 24 for California and the synthetic California, the control states, the retail between synthetic and real California, and a bigger beer consumption is really close, and a bigger difference with a slightly bigger difference. But the cigarette sales, which is our the effect, the outcome variable is really spot on between real and synthetic average, which we kind of saw that in the it was very different than the average. Close match between synthetic and real parts, which I think that outcome variable is probably the most important as compared to the log and the age and beer consumption and so on. Okay. Next slide. Linear regression squares. So we just use optimize. There's a simple optimization. Again, F min SL SQ. The basic idea is that you need to get the weights vector, and we're just going to use 1 over the number of units. Give it a list of that. I skipped over, but the loss function is that simple. So the weights times the untreated times subtracted from it, and then that error is the minimized. And the initial W matrix. So we have this constraint that, again, this is kind of like a penalty that we're going to spin the weights. We're going to sum them up, and they really should be really close to 1. So anything's going to be a penalty. And then we're going to set x's. Well, they're x's. Maybe we should call this is between it need to be bound between 0 and 1. So those are all the different bounds that we're talking about. And it spits out some for your units, and we can see that they end up being really sparse. That algorithm picked like 5 different weights. So the next slide. This is the gap chart that I showed before, right? And on the left is the gap chart from the paper. I only use the retail, the cigarette sale. Use the GDP, the beer consumption, covariates also. So we're pretty similar. A bump around with 1995 in one chart that's not in the 93 or something, and there's a little bit of bump in the chart, not the other. But they're pretty similar. So I think if you saw 2 different covariates, and actually we end up picking similar results because they both end up showing 20 per capita less than 2,000. Does that validate the approach in your something we can discuss? So the next slide. So I'm pretty sure I was using the same data. It's code and data included, but was able to find some data. And my approach ended up picking 46%, and Tennessee is a 24%. Colorado, the study cigarette sales, the retail price, the capita, the percent of the beer consumption, again with the smoking, and they ended as a third, Nevada, Montana, Colorado, and Connecticut. So we have Nevada in common, but in different weights, and they have Utah, which is kind of interesting. This it's data driven, but still, would you similar to Colorado when it comes to smoking? I'm not sure I would have. I don't know. I'm not sure I would have. I would have expected Utah to be more Mormon and more smoke or drink caffeine or alcohol, things like that, and sales to be different there. And so I would not to be similar, whatever my ignorance, but I would know more about that. But if these states were chosen, they are similar in some way. At least they would that minimize that functionality there. But that's the kind of thing that then you would stakeholders with that you're presenting this to. Okay. Next slide. We have figuring out if this is how valid this approach is placebo effect kind of study, and then you pick for every other state that's in there, you put one, and you do this whole thing where you try to estimate with the remaining, figure out the weights and stuff. You use out the its outcomes, past the treatment date. So if you did that well, it should be. These are gap line. Treatment date should be really close to 0. Anything after the treatment date. An interesting question here. Like, should they be close to 0? See those? I guess they should be close to 0. Whole process. Oh, so this whole process. The thing that are completely fit in the pre-treatment state, it needs to fit this non-negative weights, positive, and these states might just be there's no way you can get a combination of the give you a good estimate of these. This purple one and two, and those might be, if you go back to the chart of the state retail, some states that were really high, and then they came down really low to begin with and stayed really low. So if those had been the true, not the good, this would not be a good for those states. But we'll trust me, California, I think we are saying that approach for California. So, and I think in Mixtape too, they talk about excluding the states that fits are good candidates for this approach. That seems a little odd, excluding state matter. The next that they show is comparing the error from the, or not the error, the yeah. Oh, I thought you said something. I guess this is what root mean squared prediction is why. So that's just the difference between the prediction of the states as a ratio from after the treatment date. So where after the treatment date divided by the error really do have an effect, you would expect, or a big error, quote unquote error, in that state that had the effect compared to as to before. So, and the other ones should be much smaller. So they plotted this histogram and they said, oh yeah, way out here, it's got the biggest ratio between after treatment predictions. Okay, that makes sense, and that's great. I don't know why this, like, it almost shows as big an effect as California, placebo in this case, right? Make it not. Maybe it was just kind of a natural effect or something. I don't analyze that, but this other state has. Yeah. So I would. I mean, if we knew what that state was and what was happening, and we stopped smoking, even though they didn't similar law, because we took out all those states, or there might be some other reason. I don't know. Next slide. Then they said, oh, using that, you can calculate the empirical p-value, but I don't know how you do that or what the number was. Well, there's only one state that's drastic as California, so that's 1/38, so that's a p-value 0.026. It's wonderful. Calculate that empirical p-value by adding one to both the noms. Like when you do like an unbiased mean kind of a physics well enough. So but using that 0.05, not 0.06, not 0.0. If there is a statistician in the house, that'd be great. Because if you go back to that spaghetti chart, we had all there's only one that's greater than was negative 25. So you've got to count the less than 25. Where there's 25 fewer packs per person, 25 packs per person. So you only had one that would, you can calculate the p-value for that. All right. We're getting close here. And then there was a chapter more on falsifications, and I called more about like what you can do to show that this approach is. and we saw the placebo effects analysis on the states. So you can say, okay, what if we did the synthetic control strategy for 85, 84, 83, 82, whatever? You should not see a date, and that tells you that no matter what date you choose, you see the changes happen in 88, then it's a true effect. They also say, well, watching on shorter pre-treatment time, and this actually makes sense because if you remember, I pointed out, it looks like it's dropping before this proposition 88 was adopted in 80. So that they said that could be maybe there were ads or commercials proposition. They were talking about smoking and law should be enacted, and why that kind of caused people to stop or smoking little by little, even before it was an anticipation effect. And so if you shorten the pre-treatment times, but the event happens, but sometime before, minimize that effect. You can also, if you do that and your predictions go, and maybe you don't have a good fit or you're overfitting, but if you have a pretty good estimate, then you're doing pretty good. See the true effect really based on the true treatment date. I've also seen things where they just to show you that or state that we could have removed Utah from the donor pool, and we would have gotten really similar results because I didn't explicitly remove Utah with different states, and we still got really, really confident. That gives me confidence that this approach, it doesn't give me like the states that I should have used, but it gives me 5 good results. And then the other one is that they record analysis and your results show the results from other analysis. So do a different bid with somebody else. So when somebody says, hey, why didn't you do that? Have those results too. And hopefully all those results okay. Next. All right. The paper then went on to talk about prism into this at all. I skimmed it, and then I noticed that one, I didn't have the data, was like incomplete in the Python, was calling out to R anyway, so I wasn't going to R and deal with all that, so I did not dig into it. Love to hear about that, but I didn't. All right, next. And then next. A pretty recent thing, from what I can tell. I think it's from Mixtape. He says bridges the gap between quality. It's kind of data provide justification or make good selections and be able to use those covariates explain that were you use in the control. And so there's still some subjective in everything, like everything. But it's really useful. I think it's great for experiments. It also relies on this common trends. Had this parallel trends assumption, common trends assumption too. Covariates are going to be representative, and that results unless you have very different covariates or something. There's still an assumption there that you want to make sure that there are no exogenous that affected like smoking. Maybe one of those a proposition like proposition 99, but really drove down or drove up, so that's outside of your control or outside of your knowledge. That would kind of mess up the effects, the analysis. You want to make sure there's no interference between the maybe people from California drove to Nevada cheaper there or something like that. And I do know that there was a big cigarette smuggling kind of where people would buy truckloads of cigarettes and ship them up to New York and sell them. The price difference was so large that they could do that profitably, or maybe just steal. I don't know. And it is some covariates. Kind of that the reason they took the log of would be because that the relationship was not linear. See, like the right kind of relationship, you log it so that it's I'm assuming that's what it was. I don't have that data, so I couldn't see that, but yeah, that's probably why. The regression kind of concerns about things having linear relationships. Next slide. And references for this, there was a Mixtape book which I thought was really, really good, and really helped me understand what was going on. Abadi, the original was 2010. They kind of did it, and they did another review, and that kind of a little theoretical for me. Like I don't know. They really stress the whole thing and the extrapolation, interpolation, linear regression or regression, more why those requirements are awesome. And then Brady Neal has on synthetic controls where the GET does electron. So I found that. Next slide. Where I kind of did it all with NumPy, again, the Brave and True code. But there are passages talks about some R package or SATA package on. I will some more, and I will when we have time. But this time, and then next slide for has a group takes a group of untreated and there are extensions for doing multiple treated units. Are people ask, well, why not use linear? There are lots of papers. I think this is one thing. Linear regression or machine learning methods to do this. In some way, if you kind of buy into the concept, you could use anything to test to make these things. So, XGBoost or something to estimate to do whatever you want there. And then I think their basic argument is that like if you want to adhere to that whole thing or interpolation versus extrapolation, you can do all kinds of things, and then maybe there's a Bayesian approach to estimates, because then you could do Bayesian linear. But there's people looking at it, and if you want to learn that, those might be a good places to go. That's it.
All the code that you use and these plots you generated, is that code available somewhere, Julio?
I can make it available. It is copied and maybe restructured from Charger. So if you really want to see that, I would start with. I didn't make it. I mean, I can't to be. I didn't make it consumable by other people. Notebook,
That's all right. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Looks like Lars, you have a question?
The one, Brave and True does have the data names, which I found frustrating. 8.3, like why didn't they call it California? Just stay out of somewhere else that had the state names, and they were just an alphabet. It turned out they were just an alphabetical match them up, but I just matched them up, and we can, because I wanted to say Nevada, not.
Always data cleaning, no matter what. Lars, you have a question?
No,
No?
no question, but yeah, hi, first of all, and just wanted to say thanks to Julio for this nice introduction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will get your slides. Oh, I can post your slides in the the discourse for sure, so everyone can read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I really like the the causal inference for brave and true for this chapter. That was very helpful for understanding kind of it helped. Initially, I kind of had some issues with understanding the convex hull and like how that interacted with the reading through the mixtape section, but the inference, the brave and true, helped kind of make that a lot more clear.
Okay, great. I have a question for you. Is there anything, or is there something I should have emphasized more after, or these materials that I mentioned?
I think you did a good job over all various topics, and I appreciate you pulling out all these different resources from different areas, pulling in different data sets or things like that. So I wouldn't have any change to the presentation, but I'll leave it to others if they have a more specific response.
I just had an issue with the audio just from the platform, so it was a little bit. That was my main issue. It may perhaps on the YouTube. Is there might have been a clearer audio, but
yeah, I will debug that. I'll see what was going on, or I'll ask the support staff. The first time I used Restream in this way, so sorry about that. But I will get it fixed before we do another live stream. Anything else on synthetic control? I don't see anyone in the chat today. I think everyone's probably too busy drinking beers after the World Cup.
Yeah.
Anything else? Synthetic control going once, going twice. All right. So let me give you some updates on what we'll do at the tail end of this book club. So the biggest thing I'll tell you is Scott Cunningham agreed to come on and do an interview on January 15th. I think 2 Sundays after the New Year. So I will have, that'll be like the last one we do on Mixtape itself. I'll post a thread in our discourse about, and you guys can post questions or anything that you'd like to ask him. I've got a ton of questions for him from what would he change in the book? I think he's writing a second edition of this book now. So what would he do differently? Where he sees this field going from academia into, I think I see it coming more and more into industry. So I'm going to be racking my brain with questions, and I invite you folks to rack your brain with questions for him as well as just positive feedback, because he did write a fantastic book. So we'll have that January 15th. And then I may do an optional, we technically have one chapter left, which is the conclusion. So maybe January 8th, we could have a live stream, or we could just share our notes from the conclusion async on Discourse. So we can figure that all out on Discourse as well. Before I go on with a couple other updates, any questions or comments on that? Rahul said that's great, which I also think I'm really happy that Scott agreed to do this.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's very exciting.
Awesome. Then in terms of causal inference, Rahul posted in the discourse that it may be fun to do some exercises together with real world data and using these techniques. I actually think that'd be quite fun as well to do over the next couple of weeks, as we have this knowledge in our head. Maybe as some of us are trying to escape too much time with our family, we can post stuff. So feel free to continue to use the Discourse, share code or examples, chat. We could let me know if you'd like to do a more formalized event where we all work together on a single example, or we all just post what we're doing. I'm happy with that. Yeah, either way. And then after causal inference, it seems like all of you really like this book club, and I posted a thread. Should we keep something like this going? Enough positive response that we certainly will. So we'll be transitioning into state space models with JAX. So to give some insight in why I'm choosing that, a couple of reasons. One is a lot of the techniques we use in this book, they're great, and they use stata and I don't want to say older algorithms, but they use a class of computation that was like sort of fixed computation and older optimizers. And I'm actually very, very excited personally about newer forms of computation with that are gradient aware with JAX and these sort of frameworks. So learning JAX just seems like an amazing thing to do in general. But then JAX also enables us to use things like state space models, structural time series, and these are actually models that are also used in causal inference. So there's a little bit of overlap there. And the last reason is that Kevin Murphy, who has written 2 amazing textbooks, well, technically 3 if you count the first edition. Now he split the first edition into 2 second editions. Has released a library with a team of people called Dynamax. And so there's a lot of hands-on code examples that we can go through and work through and then pair it with his book. So now moving the book club from just a sort of a book club to a book/code club. So I think we'll kick that off probably February and then keep this same sort of cadence going. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I said a whole bunch about where this is going. Does this sound interesting to you folks? Anything you'd like to change?
So
I
personally, I'm
missed
super happy
it.
with it. Sorry,
Okay, go ahead.
should I continue? Or? Yeah, I'm personally super hyped about this because yeah, I'm really a fan of like dynamical systems and state space models. So I'm very happy.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
We're seeing you for sure. Julia?
Is there a particular book that you're going to?
Is there a particular book? So I need to structure this.
Okay.
What it's going to mostly be focused. The central core is going to be this this library and its documentation. So in this library, Kevin Murphy and team have created a set. Oh, it's very big. Have created a set of essentially what amounts to chapters, about 4 classes of models that have to do with state space models. So these are really good because they're really good intros models. They have really good examples. The code is worked through. So that's the code base. The other reason I like this, by the way, is their code implementation is very good. So I won't dig into it right now, but if you look into their code, it's really well written, very easy to follow, and it's amazing. And the books that back it, though, Kevin Murphy. Let me see if I can find it. Kevin Murphy's got a set of books. I'm showing you 4 examples here, but he has these books called Probabilistic Machine Learning and Introduction. They're available for free on his website. He's got 2 of them. We're not going to be going through the book in full. If you're going to be doing machine learning and stats, I highly recommend purchasing these books, but they are packed. Like if we did a book club on just one of these books, it would take a whole year. Very different style than Scott Cunningham's style of writing. So we won't be reading through the whole book, but we'll be focusing on that code base and then referring to this book as needed for theoretical backup and things like that. So think of it as a code club with a book involved rather than a book club with code, which is the flip of what happened in this one.
Okay, that makes sense. It sounds something, but I don't see it. I don't know.
I'm not showing my screen. I was not sharing my screen the whole time. That was a big miss on my part. Here's the book, ProbML. So I'll just dump this into the public chat. So this is actually 2 books. There's a first volume and a second volume, and then
Should be also in advanced topics, right? From him.
He's going to release advanced topics. I don't know whether it's out yet, and I don't know whether this is in advanced topics or not. But this is the code library Dynamax, and what we will be going through specifically are these for models. So I have to figure out whether we're going to do 1 week, 1 model, or 1 notebook per week. I'll figure out all those details. But within each of these, like this hidden Markov machine, there's a whole notebook on hidden Markov machines. So we can do a week on hidden Markov machines, talk about them, talk about how they get estimated, show how Jax and everything works. This another reason I like this book. This particular package is it uses both Bayesian estimators and optimizers, so we can then get a flavor of the different ways to solve these sorts of models. Some of these other state space models, like this generalized Gaussian state space models, can be used for causal inference, which is another cool thing for counterfactuals and with structural time series. So there'll be a little bit of overlap with our causal inference work as well. But I'm glad at least Lars is excited. Hopefully, I can convince the rest of you to be excited in a little bit here as well.
I'm super excited. That's why I wanted to get
a view.
Get going on it. I'm excited.
All right, great. Anything else for synthetic control then, or book club, or anything in general?
So, Ravin, what's the difference between, let's say, Dynamax and other state space model, like your TensorFlow probability also exists, right? So,
Yeah.
Are they doing the same thing?
So how do I word this? Well, I get the difference with Dynamax, and the reason I'm particularly compelled to this library is its documentation is really simple and written in a way that's going to be easy for us to go through. So you've got the code documentation. I really like that portion of it. The second part, which I really enjoy, is the internal code is very, very well written and easy to read. So if we're trying to learn, let's say, how the inference works, it's not too long to read through this and understand how inference and everything works. Other code bases I've looked through are a little bit challenging. So we've got documentation, we've got a really clean code implementation. I'm selfishly particularly interested in learning Jax as an AutoGrad framework. So that's the third reason, and then the fourth reason is Kevin's books are just really good. So I think we've got all the elements to go through and have a really compelling discussion and covering all of our bases. Versus, I don't know if TensorFlow probability has a book written behind it, for instance, but this one certainly does. And I will say, going through TensorFlow probability code is a bit more challenging. It's very long and there's a lot of modules and it's very code basey type of code versus Dynamax is very self-contained. So those are my reasons. That being said, if you prefer to use TensorFlow probability, it would be absolutely welcome and still useful. We could go through the conceptual learning and math and code together, and then we could refer to the TensorFlow probability documentation and compare the two, if that would be of interest.
No, I don't really have any strong opinion on either. Yeah, I've mostly been doing R for your multi-level modeling stuff. But yeah, like this Jax and Dynamax, like something that's really gonna be great in the future. So definitely looking forward to learning.
Awesome. All right, everyone seems on board then. So I'm going to see you all after you guys won't all drop off after the causal inference stuff is done. That's what I mean. Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right, so let me recap in order, and then we'll do the most important thing for last is January 8th. There may be an optional book club or just maybe an async event where we just talk about the chapter and maybe you have any final thoughts about the book. January 15th, got my dates correct. We'll have an interview with Scott Cunningham. We'll do it live. Brainstorm your questions. We'll share them on Discourse beforehand. I'll start a topic, and it'll be really good to have him answer everything that we had remaining and left, and get a sneak preview of his next book. And then in February we will restart this book club on a new topic. In the meanwhile, really excited to see all the hands-on work we're going to do. Rahul I believe had posted about stuff he wanted to do and implementing real-world examples. There's a couple new packages I want to try out. So share what you're doing over the break as you find time to do it. And then most importantly, Julio, thank you so much for creating this slide deck and leading this presentation. You clearly how much work you put into it, from looking through different sources, re-implementing code examples, pulling things out of causal inference. So you're likely the person who has the most knowledge about synthetic control. And it's sort of a natural experiment. I wonder if you had not done this, if you would have remembered as much about synthetic control. So it's a good way to learn. Thank you again for taking the time out today, leading this discussion. And thank you everyone for dealing with my reschedules 3 times for the World Cup. It was really a interesting game, and I'm glad to have seen it. So I appreciate you being flexible with time. All right.
Great.
Nothing else. We all know where to find each other. I hope you have a wonderful holidays, however you celebrate it, and certainly a wonderful New Year's. And we'll see you next year.
Great.
See you all.
Thank you so much, Rob.